Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Refugees tell harrowing stories of what the U.S. described as acts of genocide in Sudan's Darfur region, allegedly by the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement on tariff sends global markets tumbling before recovering some lost ground on news of a tariff pause on Canada and Mexico. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace publishes a roadmap of potential ideas to reinvigorate the U.S. engagement in Africa. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin our broadcast on Chad's border with Darfur, where VOA met with refugees who have told harrowing stories of what the United States is describing as acts of genocide in Sudan, allegedly by the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Henry Wilkins' report from Adre, Chad. Please note that this report includes graphic subject matter that some may find disturbing. Viewers' discretion is advised.
Noor al-Latif is a refugee who, like hundreds of thousands of others, fled to Chad from Sudan's Darfur region to escape ethnic violence over the last 2 years. She is also a trained psychologist and now spends her days in the refugee camp on the Chad-Darfur border, giving psychological support to victims.
The psychological trauma is overwhelming. The loss of loved ones is immense. Death has become too frequent. Some families have lost both parents. In such cases, the child becomes the caretaker.
Al-Latif says she works with a 14-year-old girl who became head of the family after both parents were killed. VOA spent more than a week in the refugee camp in Adre speaking to victims.
Practically everybody here at the refugee site in Adre has got a horrific story to tell about friends, family members, neighbours being murdered in what the US has called a genocide.
And the US says other crimes against humanity are also taking place. The name of this refugee has been changed and her identity protected for fear of reprisals if she returns to Darfur.
They killed my mother and my brother. They killed them in my house. They killed a lot of people.
She says she was then raped by militias linked to the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Mohammed Idris Adam, a well-known artist in the Darfuri city of El Janina, says he was on an RSF hit list. He fled the city but left everything he owned, including his life's work, behind.
The whole world condemns violations of human rights, and they have agreements under the United Nations and so on. The people responsible should be brought to trial for the crimes committed in Darfur.
The US has sanctioned the RSF leader Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo and other senior members of the group. Meanwhile, the victims' trauma continues, says Al-Latif, and for many, it seems to get worse at night.
During the day, they all seem fine, but at night, it's all screaming and chaos in the streets. It's unbelievable.
Although the Darfuris in Adre were lucky enough to escape, they still live with the horror of what happened. Henry Wilkins, VOA News, Adre, Chad.
In eastern Congo, the M23 rebels have announced a unilateral ceasefire beginning on Tuesday in the region for humanitarian reasons. This move comes after the rebels seized the city of Goma. The announcement by the M23 follows calls for a safe corridor for aid and hundreds of thousands of displaced people. The UN Health Agency says at least 900 people were killed in last week's fighting in Goma between rebels and Congolese forces. Red Cross workers and civil protection teams performed the grim task of burying at least 120 decomposing bodies in Goma. The city morgue is overcrowded following the M23 capture of Goma. The mass burial was carried out under the watchful eye of the M23 fighters. The conflict has displaced 500,000 people, raising fears of regional instability and prompting calls for the Congolese government for international sanctions against Rwanda for its alleged support of M23. Rwanda steadfastly denies that it is backing M23. U.S. President Donald Trump is announcement of tariffs on Canada, China, and Mexico send global markets in a downward spiral before recovering some lost grounds when Trump announced he would postpone the 25% tariff on Mexican goods for a month in exchange for concessions. He later announced a similar pause with Canada. VOA's Anita Powell reports from the White House.
Other countries charge us tariffs.
President Donald Trump's weekend tariff announcement is being felt in Ottawa, in Mexico City, in Beijing, and here, in New York, Hong Kong, Seoul, and Taipei. Around the world, markets fell Monday after Trump dropped 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada and 10% on China. In Washington, Trump spoke of his agreement Monday with Mexico to pause the tariffs for a month in exchange for concessions from Mexico City, meant to stop migration flows and the movement of illegal drugs across the southern border. Markets quickly made up some losses after his announcement. He also announced a similar pause with Canada later on Monday.
We have to stop people from pouring in, and we have to stop fentanyl, and that includes China. Fentanyl has killed this year at least 200,000 people. It's pouring in from China through Mexico and Canada, and they've got to stop it. And if they don't stop it, the tariffs are going to get worse, a lot worse.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum sounded a hopeful note on Monday.
I'm
sure that in this month we'll be able to have results, good results for your people, good results for the people of Mexico. And this was the result of the agreement. It was a good conversation with respect.
Economic scholars say consumers will start to feel the pinch soon and pointed to historical parallels.
This brings us back to the 1930s, when, as you may recall, a trade war was one of the factors that deepened the Great Depression as economies all over the world erected barriers in order to keep imports out. In the longer term, keeping tariffs high would end up reducing the total amount of global trade, which would diminish competition and reduce the diffusion across the world of technological innovations. And that could end up, over a longer term, reducing the pace of U.S. and global economic growth.
China's ambassador to the United Nations, Fu Kong, on Monday said Beijing would turn to the World Trade Organization for recourse.
We do believe that this is in violation of the WTO rules. So that's why China is filing a complaint at the WTO. And also where we may be forced to take countermeasures. And let me also emphasize that there is no winner in a trade war.
Trump acknowledged that the move would raise prices, but said the higher tariffs would be worth the price to bolster U.S. interests. Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
African heads of states have received an open letter urging immediate action on responsible artificial intelligence, highlighting its transformative potential in education, healthcare, agriculture, and economic growth. The letter, authorized by 3 experts of African AI Forum, warns of a risk such as misinformation and worsening inequalities. Jacques Bonjao, President, Africa AI Forum, and co-author of the letter, joins us here on Africa 54 for more insights. Hello, Mr. Bonjao. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Yes, let's begin with what prompted you and your team to send this letter to African heads of states, and why do you believe that this is the time to promote this, the responsible AI in general?
Thank you. What motivated us to write this letter is the fact that we believe the time to act is now. AI is being a very, very challenging tool for the whole world, for humanity. And it could be a tool for good as well as a tool for bad. Therefore, we happen to believe that if African leaders do not act now, the African continent will most likely become a battleground for foreign interests, and Africa would be left behind. We cannot allow that to happen.
Then how can then African leaders strike a balance between just encouraging AI innovation and the implementation to stop AI abuse?
First of all, I think that they need to create some type of framework that would allow innovation to foster. But at the same time, we need to have some safeguards. We need to make sure that our values are preserved. Africa as a whole has some specific values that we don't want to see threatened. Therefore,
And that's what would be the immediate steps that they would need to take, especially in underprivileged areas?
Absolutely. As I said, the first step would be to create some type of regulatory framework. But that will allow also for innovation, because we do need innovation in Africa. Young Africans are very creative, they are very talented, they need to keep doing what they are doing. However, they have to work under some guidelines, under some standards. We cannot afford to do just anything with AI. And as you probably know, with AI, we can harm people, we can harm mankind. Therefore, the very first step is to create this kind of framework.
Do you see political will in African leaders, Mr. Bonjal, as we wrap up? Do you see political will in this effort?
This is the aim of this letter. There is some will to do good, but they need to do that in some kind of concerted way. They cannot do it alone. Each leader cannot do it alone. They need to get together to work hard to make sure that Africa play a role, if not a key role, in AI innovation and in AI future.
Mr. Bonjal, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jacques Bonjal is the president of the Africa Artificial Intelligence Forum. Still to come, news you can use on this World's Cancer Day.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali withdraw from the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS. They are dissatisfied with the group's inability to help them fight jihadists and its ties to former colonial power France. The three countries are now turning to Russia, Iran and Turkey for support. Join me, Peter Clote, for an in-depth discussion on the realignment of powers in the Sahel region.
In other news, Uganda's Supreme Court has ruled that trying civilians in military courts is unconstitutional. Human rights groups welcome the decision as a major step in protecting the rights to fair trial. But Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni criticized the ruling, saying the country is not governed by judges but by the people. The government of Botswana and South African diamond firm De Beers says they have reached a new 10-year sales agreement following talks that had dragged on since 2019. Analyst says the diamond industry is sure to welcome the deal, as Botswana, after Russia, is the world's second largest producer of diamonds. U.S. President Donald Trump has a new vision and a new foreign policy approach than that of his predecessors, including business with the African continent. Expert at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace published a brief summary of potential ideas to reinvigorate U.S. engagement on the continent. VOA's Phil Alexio explains.
In the report, 12 studies indicate ways the new Trump administration can strengthen economic relations with Africa, at a time when China and Africa have renewed and are strengthening their partnerships. Among the ideas, Zainab Usman, the director of the Africa program at Carnegie, says maybe there needs to be a new approach to the AGOA trade deal, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, set to expire this year.
But perhaps to even rebrand it in a way that speaks to the priorities of this administration of ensuring that a trade relationship with any part of the world also benefits America as well as perhaps that other part of the world. I think it's more a matter of framing and a mindset shift. When AGOA was enacted in the early 2000s, the global economy was very different, the geopolitical environment was very different. A key objective at the time was to try to incorporate more African economies into the global economy, into the World Trade Organization system, and to encourage them to implement market reforms.
The Carnegie study shows from 2002 to 2023, Africa's trade with China has been exploding compared to the U.S., which has remained somewhat stagnant since 2015. And Usman says China's footprint in Africa is unmistakable.
The thing is, China is investing heavily in areas that are related to Africa's industrialization. You know, one survey conducted by McKinsey a couple of years ago found that there were over 10,000 Chinese companies on the continent. Small, medium, large enterprises. There are also the state-owned enterprises, and a lot of them are actually engaged in manufacturing activity on the continent.
In the race for Africa's critical minerals, a lack of reliable energy can hamper the supply chain, slowing down the production of cobalt and copper, iron ore, or lithium. Non-resident scholar Katie Oath says the U.S. needs to focus and commit to long-standing, meaningful infrastructure investments, not piecemeal ideas that can't solve big problems.
If you're going to ask a company to take immense risk in a really difficult operating environment, they absolutely need to know that the U.S. will follow through, make its payments, stand with them through years of slogging through project development and complicated bureaucracy. And my worry is that we're proving we're actually not that partner. And I worry about the long-term implications of that.
The previous administration emphasized the U.S.-financed Lobito Corridor Rail project as a potential game changer.
The Lobito Corridor project, I think, is a very good start in terms of connecting the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, and Angola, and these are all mineral-rich, mineral-producing countries, but it really does not go far enough. So I think there is an opportunity for this administration to kind of take on what was started with the Lobito Corridor project and maybe rebrand and repurpose it and go even further with thinking about how to support Africa's industrialization with refining and processing of some of these minerals. And we have a chapter in the compendium that addresses that question specifically.
It's been only weeks since Donald Trump was sworn in, and now tensions are high in the DRC conflict. Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso chose independence and have broken away from the economic community of West African states. Deals are hard to make when things are unstable, but Usman admits it's the responsibility of African countries to solve their own problems.
So maybe this is an area where he can get engaged in the conflict in DRC, with DRC and Rwanda, which really is escalating right now. Maybe he can play a role in bringing the different parties to the table.
Whether it's a diplomatic or economic approach with the continent, Usman believes the new administration can make things happen between the United States and Africa.
You know, one thing we cannot deny about President Trump is he has political will in spades, right? If he decides to do something, he will go above and beyond to do it. And he is also a president who prizes his ability to strike deals and bring various stakeholders to the table.
Philip Alexio, VOA News, Washington.
It's time now for our health report, and joining us is the amazing Africa 54 health correspondent Lenore Mudu with the latest news on Ebola. Hello, Lenore.
Hello, Oriane. Uganda has launched its first clinical trial of a vaccine against the Sudan strain of Ebola, marking a significant step in combating the outbreak that claimed its first victim last week. The trial comes as health officials race to curb the spread of the virus, which has already led to 2 additional confirmed cases.
The study targets health workers and others exposed to the Sudan Ebola strain. The trial began 4 days after Uganda announced the death of a nurse in the capital, Kampala. 2 more cases were confirmed on Monday among relatives of the first victim. Professor Bruce Kirenga is the principal investigator of the trial.
We have kicked off the vaccination for Ebola that broke out in the country last week. This exercise is involving 1 vaccine, which we have started with, and we are targeting people who are high risk. Those are people who have gotten in contact with the cases that we have confirmed.
At least 234 contacts in this outbreak have been identified. This is the first trial to assess the efficacy of a vaccine against the Sudan strain. More than 2,000 doses of the experimental vaccine are available.
The type of Ebola we have here today, Ebola Sudan, up to now does not have a vaccine which is licensed, which can be used during an outbreak situation. We have a vaccine actually in the country, the J&J vaccine, which has Ebola Zaire and a bit of Sudan, but its construct is not suitable for an outbreak response. It is suitable for a preventive response.
Health authorities say the nurse who died had sought both hospital treatment and the services of a traditional healer. They are investigating the source of this outbreak with support from the WHO.
The World Health Organization is embedded in different aspects of fighting this outbreak, and we have been with the Ministry of Health that has been in the lead, in whom we have great confidence that they are able to have a robust response to this outbreak.
Uganda has had multiple Ebola outbreaks, including one in 2000 that killed hundreds. Hopes are high that this vaccine trial could pave the way for a much-needed licensed vaccine against the Sudan strain of Ebola.
Today is World Cancer Day, and each year the world commemorates the day on February 4th to raise awareness and to strengthen actions towards improving access to prevention and care. Get this, nearly 20 million new cases of cancer are diagnosed worldwide every year, and by 2045 this figure will exceed 32 million, according to the World Health Organization. 70% of cancer-related deaths occur in low and middle-income countries. The 2025 anti-cancer campaign is based on the message United by Unique, exploring the unique stories of patients united in their fight against cancer. Now, cancer touches millions of lives in countless ways. Attila Lee, a resident of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, has been battling cancer for decades. VOA's Jean-Louis Mafema shares his unique journey.
Attila Lee, a 60-year-old Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania resident, was diagnosed with cancer at age 12. In 1975, at age 3, his grandmother, who was bathing him at the time, felt a lump in his right armpit.
My grandmother came to the United States to visit. She was bathing me. I was 3 years old, and found a lump in my right armpit. And next thing you know, they said, there's a lump here. You know how parents are, they just think it's nothing. And about 9 years later, I ended up getting Hodgkin's stage 3. I had a spleen removed, big surgery, ending up with chemo and radiation treatments.
In 1993, Attila had a relapse. It required another 6 months of chemotherapy. Still, his ordeal was not over.
I had secondary cancers, rectal cancer 2013. I had surgery, chemo radiation treatments. And then later I had colon cancer 2020, stage 2 colon cancer, and they removed 8 inches of my left descending colon and reattached.
The chemotherapy treatment and radiation was not without risks. His treatment led to hip bone damage and eventually congestive heart failure.
2018, I had 2 hip replacements, 2018 and 2020. Again, this affected my skeletal, and also I have currently now I have congested heart failure. It's inoperable. You can't do anything of it because of the extent of the differences of the deterioration from the chest radiation and chemos from childhood.
Even though he had endured and overcome life-threatening medical challenges, many would not even want to face, Attila remains positive and constantly active.
I love exercise, and I like to keep myself active. I taught martial arts and yoga, regardless of all those 2 stages I mentioned. It wasn't easy, but I did it, just to keep going. It's the attitude of continuous of physically, emotionally, and spiritually for me. Just to keep going. I don't let any health obstacles or any obstacles just put me down. The word is, I go through my obstacles that may knock me down, but it's not going to knock me out. So the attitude is, regardless of what stage of obstacles, whether it's health challenges or anything way of life of challenges, is not to allow the situation to knock you out. It's normal for all of us to be knocked down, as long as we don't get knocked out through any kind of negative or any challenges. Not give up.
After close to 49 years of struggle, with a disease that has taken the lives of millions of people, Attila remains determined to keep up with his routine of daily exercise, yoga, and meditation.
And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on X at Lenore Moudou. Back to you, Oriane.
Thank you, Lenore. Be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.